Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Shadow Self, A Journey Within. My co host, Joanne Bassetti, and I are excited about our next guest. Joanne, how are you doing today?
Very good. I'm very excited about our guest today.
Yes, I'm excited about our next guest, John Savage. John, how are you?
I'm doing great, Todd and Joanne. Hi, listeners. It's good to be on the show. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be a guest.
Well, we're very honored that you're with us today as well. John, could you give the listeners a little bit of a background about what you do?
Yeah, I feel like my journey so far has actually been multiple journeys within a journey, and each phase, just like each phase of life, has led to new discoveries about the world that I live in and that we live in, and the world within myself. It's taken me on a journey from rediscovering teaching various things like languages to others, as well as the healing arts. And that started with Reiki in 2006, from which I went through the various levels up to level 3, where I teach that now. And from there, massage therapy, of which I'm a practitioner for since 2014, and now I'm getting my master's in acupuncture and herbology of traditional Chinese medicine. I just see it. I'm not done. I feel like I'm just beginning still. There's so much more to learn.
Wow, so it sounds like you've got quite the journey thus far. I did acupuncture for a while myself, and I absolutely love it. It's been it was a great a pain relief for my back challenges I was having. So I'm so glad that you're into that. John, in our past conversations, which we've had many of, you had mentioned that you've done extensive shadow work for yourself. Could you share with the listeners what was that pivotal moment that you got started working with the shadow self? How did you get going on that?
Well, I'm going to relate an old story to you that I have closed the book on in my life a while ago, but for the sake of posterity and the nature of this show, I'm going to open it back up just to give a brief background to let everybody know where I've come from. It started out when I was about 5 years old. Like before that, I was a happy-go-lucky kid, like pretty much anybody else. And at 5 years old, I was diagnosed with clinical depression at such a young age. And from 5 to 17, I had done a roller coaster of antidepressants, antipsychotics. I was diagnosed with bipolarism, manic depression, all these different kind of things. Went to a slew of psychologists and psychiatrists. And the most frustrating thing was that I felt like I was never really listened to as to what was going on with me. They were always just trying to put these labels on me because really the thing that was disturbing me the most was looking at the people around me as I was going through my growth and developmental stages as a kid and just completely not understanding why these kids, my peers, were just so mean to each other, calling each other names and judging each other by what they had or their looks or their popularity status. And there was no way that I could verbally relate that to where anybody would be able to understand because nobody else seemed to see this as just a out of place thing, and they just all took it for granted as being normal. And so it without having an outlet, I was had periods where I would quite literally bang my head against the wall, and my parents saw this and thought, oh, this kid is disturbed and we need to find some kind of help for him. And it didn't feel like I had any outlet for it. So around 15 or 16 years old, just started writing on pages, stream of consciousness writing. And what eventually developed was a metaphorical translation for the experiences that I was having, and the emotions that I was feeling would translate into a landscape in these passages that I would write where the depression would become a swamp and feelings of serenity and calm would turn into meadows and rolling hills and so on. And it actually started to develop into this novel that I've been working on ever since. I still haven't finished it, but getting those feelings out through this translation into a descriptive environment of stream of consciousness writing really helped to translate those feelings and discover where these feelings could go to transmute them into something productive, rather than just keeping churning them over and over in my head again. And it's developed into this writing habit and skill for for which I do for a job as one of my occupations right now.
That's fantastic. I love the fact that you're hitting and opening the emotional component. That and what I heard you say was that it's okay to let the emotions flow. In order to figure out where the pivotal point was, you had to allow those emotions to come out, whether they be dark, dreary, depressed emotions. They had to come out in order for you to see the joy and the light and the other end of the spectrum. Is that correct?
Exactly, Joanne. I think that is one of the most important. If there was anything to emphasize out of this whole interview, I think that emotions and expressing them is one of the most important aspects to touch upon, because we all experience them, and just given their nature, there's something that we can't avoid and that we can't ignore either. If we ignore them, we try to push them down. It's not only that we're like putting them out of our minds, they don't go anywhere. They actually get stored in our body. There's something called somatic emotional response, where the body physically stores emotions in various spaces, and then we start to develop illness because those emotions are stagnating, which correspond to a stagnation of that particular area of the body through blood work or organ disharmony. It's part of a thing that I'm learning from acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine as well. So emotions are fluid in nature. And so if we want to be harmonious with our emotions, with our environment, then we too should learn to be fluid with them and allow ourselves to express them. And the game, and let's call it a game because really can, even with the darkest emotions, learn to play with them, is just to find what healthy outlets we can use that speak to us individually to be able to express those healthily.
Wow, that was very eloquently said because emotions are meant to be expressed.
Thank you.
You said it very well. In expressing your emotions and working with your shadow self, what was your aha moment and how did you um, come to that moment in changing your life from that little boy who had, that depression and that 15-year-old banging his head against the wall to that aha moment of working with your shadow self and changing your life to where you are now and understanding the emotions and the fluid of using the emotions and working with them?
Well, I could say that I kind of got the hard line crash course in dealing with these intense emotions from such a young age and having to deal with them for so long and being so emotionally sensitive to the world around me that it wasn't shortly after, at 17 years old, where I just said, like I'd gotten used to all of those obstructions, that inability to receive like a sounding board from people around me, where I just was forced to deal with them on my own, that I just had enough. And I said to myself that I'm more than this. During all that time, luckily, been able to maintain a sense of integrity of self, that I knew who I was And even though I felt like I wasn't able to express that, I still knew that it was there. And I knew that these feelings that I had did not define me. And so I was convinced that I could face the challenges on my own. I felt like the pills were just turning me into a zombie and making me feel even more emotionless or expressionless. And so I just stopped taking them. And I never looked back since. I was fine. I wouldn't say that I was fine after that, but the having been conditioned to deal with those intense emotions for so long, it wasn't as difficult to take them on or work with them without the pills.
And then you started alternatively looking at holistic medicine and other modalities to, like you said, you have Reiki and Chinese medicine and massage therapy. So you really didn't have nothing. You had a world of wealth and information in front of you to try other things. Is that correct?
No, actually, it wasn't like jumping from one boat onto the other. There was a 6 or 7 year period of just life experience, and really it took finding what made me feel alive, what really interested me. I was falling into a love of languages. I fell into the Rotary Youth Exchange Program right after high school, which threw me into a different world. I went and stayed with 4 different host families in Hungary. And that experience of change, of seeing life from a different perspective, was something that I really thrived on. And so, even though I was still experiencing depression at the time, I was also experiencing a different facet of life that I'd never seen before, and how people live differently from the culture that I was used to. And that really fueled me and kept me going. And then it wasn't until about 23 years old when I was living in Prague and learned how to teach English as a second language, teaching it to business professionals, that one of my students, 25-year-old, after class, introduced me to Reiki, and had such a he did a little Reiki on me, and I had this tingling sensation on the top of my head. And I said, "Whoa, what was that?" He said, "I feel the tingling sensation in my hands too." And I was hooked after that. My head tingled on and off for the next week. And so that was a real attention grabber, and that's what got me started onto these other alternative modalities. But that was 7 years after I had stopped taking those pills at 17.
So when you feel those different modalities, how can you deny that? It's like there is something to that. And it's like, wow, for me, when I was introduced to Reiki through a friend of mine, I was blown away even after the first session. And she did 3 more on me, and I was like, this is really cool. And I had to seek training. So now I pass the gift along to others. It's such a great modality.
Yes, well put. I see it that way too. Is all these things that I'm discovering and learning is just something to experience for myself and then to share with others and pass on. It is undeniable.
Right. Yep. And you talked about earlier about how you got into writing. I mean, what another great outlet to journal about how you're feeling and getting all those emotions and thoughts out of your head on paper. I find that to be very therapeutic. So thank you for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
And can you share with the listeners when you were doing the shadow work in those 6 or 7 years on your own? Did you feel that you were removing those masks, those labels? And if so, which ones do you feel that you removed?
I'm I love this question because I have one that is very very literal to the question itself and in answering. I had this dream, very vivid, around that time, where it was set at nighttime. A group of friends of mine were climbing over the backyard fence of a house, and it had the premise of a haunt being haunted, and we were crawling through the backyard. There were zombies in there, and a few of my friends got picked off. And then we were working our way through the house, and the house had corridors like a maze. And a few more of my friends were picked off until it was just the last two or three of my friends. And there were zombie monsters were getting more intense or that kind of thing until we had killed all the zombies and it was just me left alone. And there was the quote unquote, the boss, left. And it was this like a Mardi Gras mask with very long, brightly colored orange, red, and yellow feathers coming out the top of it. And it was like I was looking at it face to face. And then I grabbed this white small trash can and I turned the mask to look inside the trash can, and then I removed the bottom, and at the bottom was the mirror. And the mask was looking at itself in the mirror, and that's when the dream told me that the mask was like quote unquote defeated. And then I had jumped out the window, and then all of a sudden the ground was covered in snow, and I was on a pair of skis, and I was just slaloming down a hill afterwards. I do dream analysis as well, and that mask represented the anger and the frustration that I had been holding on to in the feelings of what I had personally felt as being incapable of trying to change the world from like those feelings as a little boy of just seeing how poorly people treat each other and my inefficacy of being able to do anything about it, to help change people's minds, to help people heal, to help this world transform into one of compassion and support for each other and loving. And feeling so incapable, this frustration builds up. And that's what I was holding on to. So that dream revealed the mask that I was holding on to.
That's powerful. That's a powerful dream. I can see the mask. It's like you must have felt so relieved though, and then to be on skis, that's like it was setting you free just to like
Uh,
soar in your journey and go wherever.
uh-huh. Yeah, that's what it was telling of, yeah. And I'm still working through that, but it's a lot easier now. I have learned different approaches that make the process a lot smoother, let's say, or a lot more abiding to roll with the tide of the ebb and flow of things.
So, since working with your shadow self and doing that, how has it helped you interact with others then? So, like when you started out as a young child and then going through school, you saw people bullied, you saw people being labeled, how cruel the world is. And we're in the same cycle now. I mean, we see that constantly in schools. We even see it in adults, and we see it with male and females, the constant power struggle. We see it in adults. You're not as good as the Joneses, or let's keep up. So let's put ourselves in debt, because we have to be as good as this one, or you don't fit into this group, or you don't fit into that group, which is just ridiculous because we're all humans and we should be unconditional love and trying to move forward and help each other. So, in you doing all the work that you've done, which is amazing, how do you see that it's helped you interact with others in your journey going forward?
I feel like it's even hard to distinguish now between what I've learned from my own experiences and the kind of teachings that I've come into along these journeys. One source that's really helped, aside from the modalities like Reiki and the massage therapy, for example, because that helps me be sensitive to, we have our body language, and it's not just how we stand or that kind of thing. It's also the kind of energetic vibrations that we're giving off. And by that, I mean, when you walk into a room, if you feel tension, or if you are passing by somebody or at a restaurant or a cafe or something like that, and for some reason you can't explain it, but you just feel comfortable around a person that you've never met before, or a new acquaintance. That's bodies speaking to each other. That's this energetic essence within our bodies that are resonating with each other, and there is a whole volume of knowledge within that we can learn from when interacting with each other, that if we get underneath the surface of these pretenses of social etiquette or social conduct that we believe we're supposed to abide by, or our inhibitions that keep us from just going up and introducing ourselves to somebody that we feel drawn to. There's like vast worlds to explore within that. One of the sources that has really helped me understand that level is a book by Dr. Miguel Ruiz, or Don Miguel Ruiz, sorry, called The Four Agreements. And he also, yeah, really, really good book, as well as the teachings of Sheila Applegate, working through her program, and so many other sources. Really, Mastery of Love, also by Don Miguel Ruiz. Some of the key principles that he teaches are: don't take things personally, be impeccable with your word. So listening between the lines of when people speak is one thing that has really helped me interact with others, so that I can, somebody might be acting under an emotional influence and their words don't really correspond with their intention. And one thing that's described in Miguel Ruiz's book is that we all have these emotional wounds that we're used to touching and probing on each other, and then like triggering and setting each other off. And then we have these disagreements or arguments that might exacerbate a relationship. And so how do we circumvent that when really our intention is to like solve an issue, to move on to the next thing, to strengthen these relationships, to gain a deeper sense of reliability and trust with one another, because that's what we really want. We don't want to have to be on our toes, on edge, on guard, left and right with each person that we meet, or like just divulge into our ego as a sense of pride or vanity or a superiority, just to gain an upper hand in every relationship that we have, as a false sense of security. We really, like what I've observed so far from my own experience and perspective, is that when we have those kind of defensive emotions, whether it be anger or jealousy or that, what lies beneath that is this hurt. We attach stories to it and so on, but it does travel back to what unresolved kind of conflict we might have had in a previous portion of our life that we're looking for closure from. And that beneath that hurt is just this desire to feel and receive a sustainable source of love. And gaining that love from within is where that sustainability comes from, rather than trying to reach out for it from another source that might not always be there in physical presence or physical mind. So learning the compassion beneath these emotional bouts of people who might be angry at a moment and say things that they don't really mean, and then looking between that, beneath that, to see what they're really saying, which is, I'm feeling hurt because of this and it makes me angry, so I am going to project that out because that's the only way I know how to deal with this emotion. I don't know how to process it. So seeing into people's hearts and what their true intention is, working with the shadow self, has really helped me to gain a deeper understanding of where people are coming from. It's really makes me laugh because it's such a great lesson and it seems like it's never ending, but there's so much value to it. And the longer the lesson goes on, the deeper sense of value I gain from it is learning patience. Patience is a virtue, and it's a most exhaustive virtue, but it's one so valuable that eventually, like, I'm not there yet by any means, but I've been put in situations, storms, let's say emotional storms or energetic storms of so much commotion surrounding me and chaos, that being able to be calm and staying afloat no matter what's going on around me, patience will help mitigate that so that I can respond tentatively to each situation with mindfulness rather than just reacting based off of how that environment makes me feel. So I can register those emotions, I can acknowledge how they make me feel. I can take a deep breath in and say, okay, I can experience this emotion. And then what is my true intention from this? How can I acknowledge what's being called of me in a way that I truly wish to respond, and then go with that, which always seems to help iron out the wrinkles rather than add into the storm. And that goes right along with not taking things personally, seeing that everybody is having their own personal experience, and all of us are. So whatever is really happening to us from other people's perspective has nothing to do with us. It's their own experience. And our experience is our own. So not taking things personally is a key component to understanding that everybody, like, no matter what their words or thoughts are, has no reflection upon us personally. So gaining a deeper understanding of why people react the way they do, why people take certain offense or have fear of certain things, why people have their struggles and what lies beneath that really helps to facilitate interactions and get to the core of the issue, to touch upon people's hearts and having the sensitivity.
That was some pretty profound information that John just shared with us. He shares some of his own personal stories while working with his shadow self, gives some great tips and ideas on how he worked with his shadow self by journaling or dream work, and understanding what that means and getting to the core of why, loving yourself unconditionally and loving yourself in all aspects, good and bad. So this concludes part one. We have part two that will be posted this Friday, April 20th. So be sure to tune in. We will have that posted. There is some great information coming, so please join us. Until then, you all have an awesome evening.